That Sunday morning changed the course of my life forever. The clock struck exactly 7:35 when my grandson Tommy walked into my room, still in his pajamas with messy hair and his big eyes full of worry. It was not common to see him awake so early, let alone with that heavy expression that seemed not to belong in the face of a 7-year-old child. He approached my bed on tiptoe, looked both ways as if checking that no one was listening to us, and then leaned in to whisper in my ear the words that would make my world crumble. "Grandma Daddy is going to run away with the stepmom taking all your money when you go on your trip tomorrow. I am Grace Foster. I am 67 years old, a widow for almost a decade. And I never thought I would need to protect my assets from my own son. My Frederick, the one I rocked in my arms, the one I taught to take his first steps, the one I comforted after every scraped knee. My only son was planning to rob me." The pain I felt was physical, like a stab in the chest. I needed to lean against the headboard to breathe. "How do you know that, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm so as not to scare my grandson further. Tommy bit his lower lip, a habit he always showed when he was nervous, exactly like his father did in childhood. "I heard Daddy talking to Auntie Victoria in the office last night. They did not see me because I was getting water in the kitchen. Daddy said all the accounts were ready and they just needed to wait for you to leave on your trip." Auntie Victoria laughed and said they would never see you again. Every word was like a new blow. Victoria Sanders had entered our lives a little over a year ago, hired as a financial advisor to reorganize the family investments after the death of George, my husband. With her efficient and seemingly dedicated manner, she quickly won the trust of all of us. I myself invited her to Sunday lunches. I treated her almost like a daughter. How naive I was. I held Tommy's little hands between mine, now trembling. "Grandma is fine, my treasure. You did the right thing telling me. Now I need you to promise me to keep the secret. Do not tell anyone, not even your mom, about this conversation. Can you do that for Grandma?" He nodded solemnly, his little eyes still worried. I sent him back to his room, telling him I would call him soon for breakfast. As soon as the door closed, I collapsed in silent tears. I cried for exactly 5 minutes. I have learned in life that even pain must have its limited time when actions are required. I got up, washed my face, and looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The white hair perfectly arranged in soft waves. The wrinkles around the eyes that I always considered marks of a life well lived. The pearl necklace I never took off. George's silver wedding anniversary gift. "You are a Foster," I whispered to myself. And Fosters do not let themselves be defeated. The plan for my trip had been meticulously organized for weeks. I would spend a month at the lake house in the outskirts of Vermont, a property I inherited from my family. It was an annual ritual I maintained religiously, my period of renewal away from the noise of the city. Frederick knew it perfectly. He knew every detail of my routine. He had access to all bank accounts, powers of attorney documents. As the administrator of the family businesses after his father's death, he had fully assumed the financial reins with my total approval and trust. I picked up the phone and called Martha, my housekeeper and confidant. For 35 years before Frederick was even born, Martha was already by my side. If there was anyone I could trust blindly, it was her. "Martha, I need you to come to my room right now. Use the service stairs and do not say anything to anyone." While I waited, I opened the nightstand drawer and took out the card with the number of Nicholas Owens, the family lawyer for decades and George's best friend. Nicholas was always my safe harbor in legal matters. More than that, he was the only one who knew the true extent of the Foster fortune, including investments and properties that even Frederick did not know existed. My late husband was always cautious. "Grace, never put all your eggs in one basket," he used to say. I mentally thanked his wisdom. Martha entered the room silently, her wrinkled face showing concern upon noticing my expression. "Ma'am, what happened?" I told her everything in great detail, watching her expression go from surprise to horror and finally to indignation. I always suspected that woman, Mrs. Grace, the way she looked at things in the house, how she asked questions about your jewelry, and Mr. Frederick, so blindly in love, saw none of this. I need to be sure, Martha. I cannot accuse my own son without concrete proof. And what do you plan to do? Are you still going to travel tomorrow? I looked at the suitcase, half packed, in the corner of the room. Clothes, carefully folded, my medications, organized books I planned to read in the quiet afternoons at the lake house. A trip that now represented the perfect opportunity for my son to betray me. No, Martha. Officially, I am going to postpone the trip due to health problems, but I want everyone to believe that I will still go just 2 days late. In the meantime, let us set our own trap. I spent the next few hours on the phone, first with Nicholas, who was as surprised as I was, but quickly regained his professional posture and began to draw up a legal plan. Then I called my old colleague from the hospital, Danielle Vance, now a captain specializing in financial crimes. Our friendship of 3 decades guaranteed her discretion and immediate support. When I went down to breakfast, I found the family gathered in the dining room. Lucy, my daughter-in-law, was serving juice to Tommy while they discussed some school matter. Frederick was reading the newspaper, seemingly absorbed in the news, and there was Victoria smiling sweetly at me, asking if I had slept well, if I needed help with the last preparations for the trip. I watched that rehearsed smile closely, the calculating eyes behind the fake concern, and felt a chill. How did I not realize it before? Actually, I replied, keeping my voice steady. I need to speak to you all. I received a call from the doctor last night, and my blood pressure is very unstable. He recommended postponing the trip for 2 days to adjust the medication. The shadow of disappointment that crossed quickly over Frederick and Victoria's faces was all the confirmation I needed. They exchanged a quick look that did not go unnoticed by my eyes, now attentive to every detail. But do not worry. I continued pouring myself a cup of tea with the tranquility of someone who knows nothing. It is just a precaution. In 2 days, I will be on my way to Vermont, and you will have a whole month of peace without this old woman hovering around here. Frederick forced a laugh. What nonsense, Mom. We will miss you as always. I returned the smile, thinking about how that same smile inherited from his father now masked a betrayal I could never have imagined. While everyone returned to their trivial conversations, I began to formulate in my mind the details of what would be my own counterattack operation. Victoria and Frederick wanted my money, while I would give them a lesson on the true value of family and what it means to face a woman who has survived all the storms life has thrown at her. After finishing breakfast, I retired to my room with the excuse of needing rest. In reality, my mind was boiling with thoughts and theories. As I closed the door, I felt an almost physical pain, thinking about the possibility that Frederick, my only son, was truly planning to betray me. Was it possible that the boy I raised with so much love could orchestrate something so cruel? I sat in the armchair near the window, the same one where I nursed him so many nights when he was a baby, and allowed the tears to come silently while planning my next move. The discreet sound of a knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. It was Martha with chamomile tea. You need to keep your strength, she said, placing the tray on the nightstand. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Maybe it is just a misunderstanding. I wiped my tears with the embroidered handkerchief I always carried in my pocket, a gift from my late husband on our first wedding anniversary. Tommy would not invent something like this. Martha, you know that child. He has a heart pure as spring water. If he said he heard, it is because he heard. I took a sip of the tea and organized my thoughts. The first step was to gather concrete evidence. I could not act based solely on the account of a child, no matter how much I trusted my grandson. I need Frederick's cell phone, I murmured, more to myself than to Martha. Impossible, ma'am. He never leaves that device far from his eyes and the computers. The laptop he uses to work at home, always locked in the office when he is not using it. And now it has a password. I frowned. Since when did my son put a password on his work equipment in our own house? That was already suspicious behavior. I remembered that in recent weeks, Frederick had been having phone conversations, always in a low voice, ending them quickly when I approached. At the time, I attributed it to business stress, but now everything took on a new perspective. I picked up my phone and called Nicholas Owens. His secretary answered, but I insisted it was urgent. In less than a minute, I heard his deep and comforting voice. Grace. I was just thinking about you. Is everything okay, Nicholas? I need you to verify some things for me with absolute discretion. I briefly explained the situation, listening to his occasional gasps of astonishment. I want to know if there have been recent attempts to move funds in the main accounts. Documents requested anything unusual. I will verify immediately. I have a meeting with the bank board at 2 in the afternoon. I will take the opportunity to sound out Stephen discreetly. Stephen Quinn, manager of the Pacific National Bank for over 15 years, was practically family. He knew every investment, every property of the Fosters, and more importantly, he was George's godson. If anyone tried to access our account suspiciously, he would certainly know. "Call me as soon as you know something," I asked, ending the call. I spent the whole morning on alert, watching every move of Frederick and Victoria around the house. Around noon, I noticed something interesting. They always checked if I was nearby before talking. Several times, I caught complicit glances, discreet touches of hands, whispers interrupted upon my approach. To anyone paying attention now, the conspiracy was almost palpable in the air. Lucy, my daughter-in-law, seemed completely oblivious to everything, always dedicated to Tommy and the charity work she coordinated. She maintained that melancholic expression she had been dragging for years. I knew her marriage to Frederick was not the happiest. My son never knew how to truly value her. But was it possible that she was also involved? I watched her during lunch, her delicate gestures when serving the salad, the affectionate attention to Tommy, the polite cordiality with Victoria. No, I concluded, Lucy was not part of that. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I received the call I was anxiously waiting for. It was Nicholas, his normally calm voice now loaded with concern. "Grace, I need to see you personally. Can I stop by in an hour?" My heart raced. "Is it that serious?" "Unfortunately, yes. Prepare a strong tea." That hour of waiting seemed like an eternity. To hide my anxiety, I dedicated myself to organizing old photo albums in the living room, an activity that would justify my presence when the lawyer arrived. Martha, perceiving my nervousness, stayed close, inventing tasks that kept her in the same area. When the doorbell finally rang, I almost jumped from the armchair. Martha went to answer, returning accompanied by Nicholas, who seemed to have aged 5 years since our last visit just 2 weeks ago. "Grace." He greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, a formal gesture we maintained despite decades of friendship. "Let us go to the winter garden," I suggested, knowing that was one of the few places in the house where we could talk without the risk of being overheard. The thick glass walls and the constant ambient music of the fountains guaranteed privacy. Once settled among the ferns and orchids, I was so proud of Nicholas opened his briefcase and took out some documents. Stephen showed me something alarming. He began his voice almost a whisper, despite being alone. In the last 3 weeks, there were 4 attempts at significant transfers from your main accounts to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. I felt the blood freeze in my veins. How is that possible? Transfers of that caliber require my express authorization. Exactly. And all were rejected because the signatures, although very well done, did not pass the bank's biometric verification. He slid a document across the glass table. It was a copy of a transfer authorization with what appeared to be my signature. To untrained eyes, it would be perfectly authentic. My God, I murmured, bringing my hand to my mouth. That is not all. Nicholas continued passing me more papers. There were inquiries about all the family properties' market valuation requests, and even a probe into the possibility of a quick sale of the lake house. The lake house was my refuge, my sacred place full of childhood memories and precious moments with George. The idea that my son considered selling it without my knowledge was like a stab in the heart. Who made those inquiries? Officially you, but in practice, Frederick, using a general power of attorney you signed 2 years ago. I remembered that document well. At the time, I had just recovered from pneumonia, and Frederick argued that it would be prudent for him to have powers to act on my behalf in case of emergency. I trusted fully. I signed without batting an eye. How naive I was. There is more, Nicholas said hesitantly. Stephen mentioned a woman who has accompanied Frederick on recent visits to the bank. A financial advisor, according to him. He introduced Victoria Sanders. Exactly. He found her extremely interested in the details of accounts and investments, asking questions that went beyond the professional scope. Stephen is a discreet man, you know, but he commented that he felt something predatory in the way she absorbed the information. Predatory. The word resonated in my mind. Perfectly adequate for that woman who infiltrated our family like a snake. Stephen only did not contact you directly because all attempts at movement were blocked by the bank's security systems. But he is worried, and so am I. Grace. I looked at the lush foliage around us, so full of life and beauty, contrasting with the rot we were discovering in my own house. What do you recommend, Nicholas? He adjusted the glasses on his face, a gesture he always did before presenting an important legal strategy. First, do not confront them yet. Second, reinforce the security measures of the accounts immediately. We can add extra levels of verification, maybe even discreetly revoke some powers of attorney without Frederick noticing. Third, investigate deeper into this Victoria Sanders. I have a contact in the federal police who can verify if there is anything in her history. I nodded thoughtfully. And what about Lucy and Tommy? I need to protect them too. If you allow me the sincerity, I do not believe Lucy is involved. I have watched that girl for years, and I only see genuine dedication to you and the little one. I believe so too, but I fear for her safety when everything comes to light. Nicholas covered my hand with his in a paternal gesture. One step at a time, Grace, for now. Maintain the appearance of normality. Continue with the plan to postpone your trip and observe. We need to gather as much evidence as possible. After Nicholas left, I felt strangely calmer. Having confirmation of my suspicions was painful, but at least I was not crazy or paranoid. The danger was real, and now I could fight it. During dinner that night, I maintained a facade of tranquility, discussing trivialities and plans for my supposed trip. Frederick seemed particularly solicitous, offering to personally verify the preparations for the estate. Do not worry, Mom. I can call the foreman and ensure everything is in order for your arrival. Thank you, son, but I have already taken care of that. I replied with a smile that did not reach my eyes. Edward knows exactly how I like things. I saw a flash of frustration in his look, quickly masked with another offer of help. Every solicitor's word now sounded like a lie in my ears. As I watched him interact with Victoria, the looks of complicity, the way their hands occasionally touched under the table, I wondered, when had my son transformed into this stranger before me? What failure of mine in raising him led to this path of betrayal? After dinner, I retired early, claiming tiredness. In reality, I needed to continue my investigation. In the room, I called my friend, Danielle Vance. After years working together at St. Catherine's Hospital, where I was head nurse, we maintained a solid friendship, even when she decided to change careers and join the police force. Danielle, I need your help like never before. I began after the initial greetings. I explained the situation in detail, from Tommy's warning to the bank's discovery. She listened in silence, interrupting only to ask precise questions. I can check that woman's background discreetly, she offered. If she has a pattern of behavior, she left traces somewhere. No one is so perfect as not to make mistakes. How much time do you need? A few days at most.
I have access to databases that the common citizen cannot imagine exist.
There was a significant pause.
Grace, if we confirm that she is a professional con artist, the situation changes completely. It would not just be a case of family betrayal, but organized crime. The gravity of that possibility had not occurred to me. What if Victoria was not acting alone? What if there was a larger network behind her? Do whatever is necessary. Danielle, I need to protect not only my assets, but mainly Tommy and Lucy. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of every year on my shoulders. I remembered George and how much he loved our son. "You will take care of him when I am no longer here," were his last words to me. How would he feel, knowing that the son who made him so proud was planning to betray his own mother? A soft knock on the door interrupted my musings. It was Tommy, already in pajamas, his hair damp from the bath. "Can I say goodnight, Grandma?" I opened my arms and he came running, snuggling into my lap as he had done since he was a baby. His smell of baby soap and the innocence of that hug almost made me cry. "Is Grandma sad?" he asked, noticing my expression. "No, my love, Grandma is just thoughtful." He looked at me with those blue eyes, so similar to George's, a wisdom beyond his age shining in them. "Do not worry, Grandma. Everything will be fine." I kissed his forehead, marveling at his intuition. "Yes, everything will be fine. Now go to sleep. It is late for boys your age." After he left, I made a decision. The next day, I would discreetly install security cameras in strategic points of the house. If Frederick and Victoria were conspiring, I would capture their conversations, gather irrefutable proof, not for revenge,
but for justice. Not just for me, but for the legacy my husband built with so much effort and that I had the duty to protect. That night, I slept little. I dreamed of George young and strong as in the early years of marriage, smiling at me while saying, "Remember who you are. Grace Foster, you never bow down to storms." The next morning, I woke up determined. I called a trusted security company, and using the pretext of concern about burglaries in the neighborhood, I hired the installation of a new camera system strategically positioned to cover the office, the living room, and other places where Frederick and Victoria used to talk. The technician arrived discreetly presented to the family as a specialist in electrical maintenance. While supervising the work, I kept an eye on the activities of my son and his accomplice. They seemed restless with my constant presence, exchanging worried looks when they thought I was not watching. By the end of that day, I had not only a sophisticated monitoring system, but also something even more valuable, the growing certainty that I was on the right path. While watching the first recordings on my tablet, protected by the silence of my room, I prepared to face the next step of my investigation, confronting not only my son's betrayal, but also my own mistakes that allowed us to reach this point. The clock struck almost midnight when I received a message from Danielle. "I found something. We need to talk urgently tomorrow." Attached was a photo of a newspaper clipping showing a woman very similar to Victoria, but with another name next to an elderly man. The headline read, "Businessman loses fortune at the hands of con artist secretary." The storm that was approaching was much bigger than I imagined, and the web of lies surrounding my family began to unravel under my fingers. Trembling but determined, I woke up with the weight of that photo still in my mind. I could barely sleep after seeing the image Danielle had sent. The resemblance between that woman in the newspaper and Victoria was unmistakable. The same almond eyes, the calculating smile, only the hair different, darker, and shorter in the photo. I got ready, quickly determined to meet Danielle as soon as possible. During breakfast, I announced that I needed to resolve some pending matters before the trip and would spend the day out. Frederick looked up from his cell phone, visibly interested. "Matters at the bank." "Mom?" "No, son. I'm going to the hairdresser and then to lunch with old colleagues from the hospital." I lied with a naturalness that surprised me. "Old lady thinks nothing that interests you young people." I saw the interest in his eyes diminish instantly. It was fascinating how he underestimated my capacity just because of age, a mistake many make with older people, and that would now play in my favor. "Martha will go with me, so do not worry about lunch." I left elegantly dressed, as I always did when leaving the house. Edward, the private driver I hired years ago after George insisted I should not drive alone in the chaotic streets of the city, was waiting for me at the door. He was a discreet and loyal man, another figure who had become almost part of the family. "Good morning, Mrs. Grace. Where are we going?" "Financial Crimes Division, Edward. Do you know where it is?" He nodded without showing curiosity. One more point in favor of his discretion. During the ride, I received a call from Nicholas informing me that he had gained access to more documents proving Frederick's attempts to transfer my assets. The worst part is that he forged your signature on 3 separate occasions.
Grace, that constitutes a serious crime. I close my eyes for a moment, feeling that characteristic pain in my chest that accompanied me since it all began. My own son, a criminal. How did we get to this? The police station was a modern building in the city center. Danielle was waiting for me at the entrance, her imposing bearing contrasting with the warm smile she gave me when she saw me. We hugged briefly before she guided me through the corridors to her private office. I reserved the whole morning for our matter, she explained, closing the door behind us. What I discovered is serious, Grace. I sat across from her desk while she opened a folder with various reports, photos, and documents. She placed everything organized in front of me as we used to do with patient records at the hospital. Victoria Sanders is actually Valerie Stone. She pointed to an identity document with Victoria's photo, but with another name. She has an extensive history of fraud in at least 3 countries. Her modus operandi is always the same. She approaches rich people, preferably elderly or vulnerable heirs, gains their trust, and then disappears with a small fortune. I examined the newspaper clippings. There were at least 5 documented cases, although only 2 had resulted in formal investigations. The others were silenced by families who preferred to avoid public scandal. This is the most recent one. Danielle continued showing the same photo she had sent me the night before. Albert Mendes, 82 years old businessman in the textile sector in Santiago, Chile, lost approximately $3 million at the hands of Valerie, who worked as his executive secretary. When the family realized she had already disappeared and was never caught, she is extremely careful. Changes identity frequently works with accomplices who move the money through offshore systems and always chooses victims who will hesitate to make the fraud public out of shame or protection of family reputation. I scanned the documents, every page confirming my worst fears. It was not just my son being manipulated by passion or momentary greed. We were facing a professional criminal. And what about Frederick? Is he an accomplice or a victim? Danielle hesitated, leaning back in the chair. That is what we need to find out. From experience with similar cases, these con artists generally seduce someone close to the main target. A son, nephew, even trusted employees. Sometimes these partners really believe they are in love and are manipulated. Other times, they are willing accomplices motivated by family resentments or greed. The idea that Frederick was consciously involved was devastating. I preferred to believe in that moment that he was being manipulated, blinded by some spell that woman had cast on him. How did she get to you? Danielle asked. I reflected for a moment, trying to reconstruct the events. She was recommended by a colleague of Frederick's to reorganize our investments after George's death. She presented herself as a specialist in family wealth management. Her documents, diplomas, everything seemed impeccable. documents can be forged, references invented. Probably the colleague who recommended her is part of the criminal organization. Criminal organization. The word resonated in my mind like a funeral toll. We were not dealing just with a solitary con artist, but possibly a structured organization. What can we do? Danielle? She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, her expression now completely professional. We have two options. Open a formal investigation right now, which would mean statements, court orders, and eventual publicity, or set up a discreet operation to catch them in the act, protecting your assets and the family reputation to the maximum. I did not hesitate. The second option, without a doubt, I suspected you would choose that. She smiled. We will need your full collaboration. You will have to act normally, maybe even give the impression that you are facilitating their access to the money. You want me to be the bait, I concluded. In a way, yes, but extremely well-protected bait. We spent the next hours working out a detailed strategy. Danielle explained that we would need more concrete evidence of criminal intent, recorded conversations, documented transfer attempts, proofs of forgery. The material we already had was substantial, but did not guarantee an incontestable conviction, especially if Frederick claimed he was just reorganizing the family businesses with my implied consent. When I left the station, I carried with me not only the folder with all the evidence, but also additional small recording devices that Danielle provided, more discreet and sophisticated than the cameras I had installed. Place them in places where they talk most frequently, she instructed me. And remember, act naturally if they suspect the whole plan could collapse. I returned home in the early afternoon carrying shopping bags as an alibi for my day out. Martha, who had accompanied me to the station and then really gone to do some shopping to keep up appearances, helped me carry the bags inside. Any sign of them? I asked discreetly while we went up the stairs. Mr. Frederick left early, said he had meetings. Miss Victoria stayed at home until noon, checking the computer in the library. Then she went out for lunch and has not returned yet. And Lucy and Tommy. Mrs. Lucy took the boy to swimming class, and then they would go visit her mother. Perfect. The house was empty, giving me the ideal opportunity to install the new devices. With Martha's help standing guard while I worked, I positioned the tiny recorders in strategic places under the desk, in the office, behind a painting in the library, inside a floral arrangement in the sitting room. Next, I took the opportunity to check the computer in the library that Victoria had used. It was an old desktop we kept mainly for Tommy to do school research. Luckily, she had not deleted the browsing history. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Searches about international transfers, luxury real estate websites in countries like France and Italy, and most alarming, an email sent to someone identified only as M, saying everything on track. The old lady travels in 2 days, await final instructions. The old lady, that was how they referred to me. I felt indignation burn in my chest, momentarily replacing the pain of betrayal. I took screenshots of everything using my cell phone as Danielle had directed and sent the images to her immediately. Her response came in minutes. Excellent work. This helps establish intent. Keep watching." At sunset, Frederick returned. He came straight to my room, knocking softly before entering. He was wearing one of his expensive Italian suits, a gift from me on his last birthday. "How was your day, Mom?" he asked with apparent interest, sitting on the edge of my bed. "Wonderful, son. Meeting old colleagues always rejuvenates me." I smiled, playing my role. "And you? How were the meetings productive? We are closing that negotiation with the European investors." I told you about European investors. He had never mentioned such a thing. One more lie to add to the list. "That is great, dear. Your father would be proud." Something flashed in his eyes. Guilt. Remorse. But it disappeared quickly. "Actually, I came to check if you still intend to travel the day after tomorrow. We can postpone it more if you do not feel well." There was a poorly disguised anxiety in his voice. Of course, he wanted to confirm my departure. Their plan depended on my absence. No, I am already perfectly fine." The doctor adjusted my medication and said I can travel calmly. In fact, I already started packing. His relief was almost palpable. "Excellent. Let me help you with any preparation you need." "Thank you, son. Just one thing. I was thinking of leaving you a broader power of attorney during my absence. You know how forgetful I am sometimes, and the lake house has terrible phone coverage. If any emergency arises with the investments," his eyes shone instantly. It was like watching a predator glimpsing its prey. Of course, Mom, a very sensible decision. I can arrange the document for you to sign tomorrow. That would be great. Ask Nicholas to prepare everything. His enthusiasm diminished visibly at the mention of the lawyer. "No need to bother him. Our legal department can take care of that." "I insist, dear. Nicholas has handled these matters since your father was alive. He knows exactly how to draft these documents." Frederick forced a smile. "As you wish, Mom. I will call him tomorrow." After he left, I took a deep breath to calm my racing heart. It was agonizing to maintain this facade, pretending everything was fine while he lied to me blatantly. But I needed to continue for the sake of the investigation. I reviewed the camera footage on the tablet, watching as Victoria had returned, and immediately sought out Frederick. They talked briefly in the kitchen, where she seemed agitated, gesturing emphatically. The audio was not perfect, but I managed to catch fragments. "We cannot wait any longer. Transfer to the Caymans first, then. Lawyers suspect something." I sent these recordings to Danielle too, who responded quickly. "They are accelerating the plan. We need to act soon." That night, during dinner, I maintained my performance of a carefree old woman, commenting animatedly about my plans for the stay at the lake house, the readings I would do, the walks I planned. Victoria, now that I knew who she really was, seemed so transparent in her manipulations. The forced smiles, the questions about my itineraries, the subtle suggestions for me to rest completely without worrying about financial matters. Lucy, in contrast, seemed genuinely saddened by my imminent departure. "I will miss you, Mrs. Grace," she said, with that soft voice that always reminded me of a shy girl, despite her 39 years. "Tommy, too."
The house is different without you. I covered her hand with mine. I will miss you too, dear, but a month flies by. If she knew what was about to happen, I had a moment of doubt. Should I alert her, prepare her in some way? But Danielle had been emphatic. The fewer people knew about the plan, the better. Surprise was our main ally. After dinner, Frederick announced he would go out to resolve some matters. Victoria almost immediately said she also needed to go out to meet a friend. The coincidence was so obvious, I almost laughed. Instead, I wished them good night and retired to my room. 20 minutes later, I received a message from Edward, whom I had instructed to follow them discreetly. Both in the same car heading south, stopped at the Grand View Hotel. The Grand View Hotel, one of the most luxurious in the city, known for its discretion with guests who preferred privacy, probably discussing the final details of the fraud. I called Danielle and reported the day's events. She listened attentively before saying, "The time has come to set the final trap tomorrow. Proceed as we planned. Make the announcement of the special farewell dinner. Everything has to look perfectly normal, and if they try something before we will be ready, I have a team ready to intervene at any moment, but ideally, we want to catch them in the act with irrefutable evidence." After hanging up, I stood watching the stars through my bedroom window. It was a clear night, rare in the sky usually polluted of the city. I remembered how George and I used to sit in the garden on nights like this, dreaming of the future, planning the life we would build together. We never imagined that our only son, the greatest joy of our lives, would one day turn against everything we represented. "What would you do, my love?" I whispered to the stars as if George could hear me from somewhere. How did we get to this point? There was no answer, only the comforting silence of the night. But inside me, I knew what I needed to do. It was not just about money or properties. It was about justice, about protecting the legacy we built with so much love and work. It was about teaching a painful but necessary lesson. The next morning, I announced during breakfast that I would like to have a special farewell dinner at the Grand View restaurant, one of the most elegant in the city, with a privileged view of the skyline. "I want to gather you all before leaving," I explained. "Including Frederick, please invite Nicholas. I have some documents I would like to sign in his presence." My son exchanged a quick look with Victoria, a flash of triumph they tried to disguise. They thought their plan was working perfectly. What they did not know is that they were walking directly into a meticulously prepared trap, and that farewell dinner would really be a farewell not from me to my family, but from them to their freedom and to the life of lies they had built at the cost of my trust and love. When they left to handle matters, I sat with Lucy on the back terrace where we used to drink tea while watching Tommy play in the garden. There was something I needed to do before the plan went ahead. "Lucy, dear, can I ask you a personal question?" She seemed surprised, but nodded gently. Of course, Mrs. Grace, are you happy in your marriage? I mean, her eyes lowered, fixing on the teacup. The prolonged silence was answer enough. You do not need to answer, child. I always observe more than you imagine. A solitary tear rolled down her face, which she quickly wiped away. I try for Tommy. He deserves a complete family. I took her hands between mine. And you deserve to be happy, my dear. Remember that in the coming days. Whatever happens, know that you and Tommy will always have a home with me. She looked at me confused, but I made no further comments. Instead, I changed the subject, asking about Tommy's swimming lessons. I could not reveal more, but I felt I needed to prepare her, even if subtly, for the storm that was coming. In the afternoon, I received a visit from Nicholas, who brought the special documents we had prepared. Not the broad power of Attorney Frederick expected, but a series of additional
legal protections for my assets, and more importantly, a new will that would guarantee Tommy and Lucy would be protected regardless of what happened to Frederick. Everything is ready for tomorrow. Confirmed, Nicholas.
Stephen will be at the bank at night, as we agreed. Danielle will position her team strategically. When they try to access the accounts, they will be caught red-handed. I completed. He adjusted his glasses, a nervous gesture he rarely showed. Grace, are you still sure about this? It is your son. We could resolve everything discreetly without involving the police.
I looked long out the window, watching the clouds forming on the horizon. A storm approaching both literally and figuratively. If it were just for money, Nicholas, I could forgive. But it is for betrayal, lies, manipulation. It is for a woman who specializes in destroying families. I cannot allow this to continue. He nodded, respecting my decision. When he left me with the signed documents and a comforting hug, the kind of gesture only decades of friendship allow. Night came quickly, bringing with it the weight of anticipation. Tomorrow, everything would be revealed. Tomorrow, we would face the truth, however painful it was. I went to Tommy's room to say goodnight, as I always did when I was home. He was sitting on his bed, leafing through an adventure book, his little face concentrated on the story. Time to sleep, little one, I announced from the door. He smiled when he saw me, that innocent smile that always melted my heart. Grandma, are you really going on a trip? Yes, treasure. But before that, we will have a special dinner tomorrow. Remember? He nodded, but there was a shadow of worry in his look. Can I tell you a secret, Grandma? I sat next to him on the bed. Of course you can. All secrets are safe with me. Yesterday, I heard Daddy talking on the phone. He said they were going to disappear with Grandma's money. His eyes filled with tears. What does that mean, Grandma? Why does Daddy want to disappear with your money? I hugged him tightly, feeling his small body tremble against mine. Even in the midst of the pain of betrayal, there was a final confirmation through the innocence of a child. that we were on the right path. Do not worry about that, my love. Grandma will take care of everything. Just remember that whatever happens, Grandma will always be here for you and for your mother. He fell asleep in my arms while I watched over his sleep, thinking about the world he would face after the next day's events. A world where his father would be exposed as a traitor, where the family he knew would be irretrievably altered. I will protect you, I promised silently, whatever the cost. The crucial day dawned with a surprisingly clear sky over the city. I woke up before dawn, my mind reviewing every detail of the plan, while watching the light filter gradually through the curtains. In the hours before the big dinner, the mansion bustled with a tense normality.
Frederick and Victoria came and went, making mysterious calls, exchanging whispers when they thought no one was watching. By mid-morning, I received a visit from Danielle. Under the pretext of returning some borrowed books, she handed me the last recording devices and confirmed the final strategy. Tonight, we will have undercover agents in the restaurant, she explained in a low voice, while we pretended to examine an old photo album in the library. 2 waiters and a couple at a nearby table. Stephen will be alert at the bank with his security team. If everything goes according to plan, we will catch them when they try to make the transfer with the falsified documents. And if they suspect something, Frederick knows my routines, my expressions well. He might notice something does not fit. Danielle looked at me with confidence. Grace, you are a head nurse for decades. You handled emergencies, difficult patients, life or death situations. You can handle this performance for a few hours. Her words rekindled something in me. That core of steel I had forgotten I possessed, forged in long hospital shifts, tempered in the crises I had faced throughout my professional life. You are right, I stated with renewed determination. I was always good in pressure situations. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I began to get ready for dinner. I carefully chose an emerald green silk dress, George's favorite color, and the full set of jewelry he had given me on our last anniversary together. A necklace, earrings, and bracelet of emeralds set in platinum that I barely used, reserved for truly special occasions. While Martha helped me with the necklace class, I saw her study my reflection in the mirror with concern. Ma'am, you are very pale. Are you okay? It is just nerves, Martha. Today, much is decided. Everything will be fine, she affirmed with the certainty only years of loyalty can give. The truth always comes to light, and you are on the right side of this story. At 7 o'clock sharp, the whole family gathered in the foyer. Frederick elegant in his dark suit, Victoria stunning in a daring red dress, Lucy discreetly beautiful in pale blue, and little Tommy adorable with his formal outfit that made him look like a miniature man. You all look magnificent, I commented, descending the stairs with studied calm. This night will be unforgettable, I am sure. We headed to the Grand View restaurant in 2 cars. Frederick insisted on driving his with Victoria, while I would follow with Lucy, Tommy, and Edward. During the ride, I maintained a light conversation about the lake house and plans for my stay. Although my mind was completely focused on the operation about to unfold, the restaurant located on the top floor of one of the city's most exclusive buildings offered a panoramic view of the illuminated city. We were received by the matrai, who discreetly made an almost imperceptible gesture, confirming everything was prepared according to plan. Our table, strategically located in a privileged corner, already had the presence of Nicholas, who stood up to greet us with the formality characteristic of men of his generation. "Grace, you look absolutely splendid tonight," he commented, kissing my hand gallantly. "The occasion deserves it," I replied with a smile. As we settled in, I discreetly identified the undercover agents and overly attentive waiter, a young couple at the adjacent table pretending to be absorbed in a romantic conversation, and the restaurant manager himself, who had been informed of the essential aspects of the operation. The first part of the dinner passed with studied normality, trivial conversations about the weather, the latest news, family anecdotes we had all heard 1,000 times. I watched Frederick discreetly check his watch every few minutes, his anxiety barely contained under a facade of normality. After the main course, it was time to execute the first phase of the plan. I signaled the waiter, who brought a bottle of champagne. "I would like to propose a toast," I announced, raising my glass to the Foster family and the values we represent. Integrity, loyalty, and unconditional love. I saw Frederick swallow hard, his gaze fleeing mine. Victoria, however, raised her glass with a confident smile, completely oblivious to the irony of my words. Before continuing with dinner, I went on. "I would like to address the pending matters." I turned to Nicholas. "Did you bring the documents we discussed?" He nodded solemnly, opening his briefcase. "Everything is requested, Grace." It was at that moment I executed the rehearsed move. I brought my hand to my chest, letting out a small groan of pain. Everyone at the table started. "Mom, what is wrong?" Frederick asked, genuinely alarmed. "No, it is nothing," I replied with a weak voice, closing my eyes momentarily. "Just a twinge. It is passing. Do you need a doctor?" "Ma'am," asked Lucy, already half standing. "No, dear. It is just—" Another groan, this time more pronounced. Maybe it is better to go to the hospital just to check." My heart history. Panic settled at the table. Exactly as planned, Lucy immediately offered to accompany me along with Tommy. Nicholas also offered to go. No, I intervened, following the script. "I do not want to ruin everyone's night. Nicholas, please stay and explain the documents to Frederick. Son, can you sign for me as agreed? I have full confidence in you." I saw the glint of opportunity in his eyes, poorly disguised by forced concern. "Are you sure, Mom? Can I go with you?" "It is not necessary. Lucy and Edward will accompany me." "You and Victoria finish the business with Nicholas, and then you can meet us at the hospital." I got up with feigned difficulty, leaning on Lucy. Tommy seemed genuinely scared, his little eyes watery. "Grandma will be fine, my angel," I assured him, caressing his little face. "It is just a precaution." As we walked away from the table,
I cast one last look back. I saw Frederick lean immediately toward Nicholas, eager to see the documents, while Victoria sneakily typed something on her cell phone under the table. The trap was sprung. Now it was just a matter of time. In the car, as soon as we were far enough from the restaurant, I straightened up, normally, surprising Lucy. "Mrs. Grace, are you okay?" "Perfectly fine, dear. Do not worry. There was something I needed to tell you away from them." During the ride, I briefly explained the situation, not all details, just enough for her to understand the gravity of what was happening. I saw the shock, disbelief, and finally pain on her face as she understood her husband's betrayal. "I suspected an affair," she confessed with a broken voice. "But this is much worse than I imagined. I'm so sorry, Lucy, more than I can express." She wiped a tear, taking a deep breath to compose herself in front of Tommy, who watched the scene with attentive eyes. "What happens now?" she asked in a low voice. "Now we go to the Pacific National Bank, not the hospital. It is there that Frederick and Victoria will head as soon as they realize the true nature of the documents, and it is there they will be confronted." Edward, following my precise instructions, drove us skillfully through the night traffic. At the bank, Stephen awaited us at the service entrance, accompanied by Danielle and two discreetly positioned officers. "They just called," informed Stephen. "They are on their way, extremely agitated." Apparently, they realized the documents were limitations, not broad powers. Danielle approached, serious in her dark suit. "Are you ready, Grace? We can still stop everything." I looked at Lucy, who held Tommy close to her chest protectively, and then at the imposing building of the bank, symbol of the financial stability my husband and I built with so much effort over decades. "Am I ready?" I replied firmly. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way. We entered the bank, where everything was prepared for the final confrontation. The cameras were activated, the officers positioned strategically, and the trap completely set, only awaited its victims to take the final step toward their own ruin. The clock struck exactly 9:47 when we heard the sound of tires screeching at the bank entrance. Frederick had arrived, running directly toward his own fall. The sounds of hurried footsteps echoed on the marble floor of the empty lobby. I remained motionless in the gloom of the main meeting room, where only a few strategic lights were on. Beside me, Danielle maintained a firm posture, while Lucy held Tommy against her chest, sitting on a sofa in the less illuminated corner. Nicholas had arrived a few minutes earlier, bringing with him the folder with all original documents, those Frederick had tried to forge in recent months. Stephen was the first to advance toward the door, assuming his role of unsuspecting manager, answering an urgent call from an important client. I watched through the crack of the ajar door as my son entered the bank like a hurricane, face contorted in an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of anger, greed, and desperation that made him almost unrecognizable to me. "Where is my mother?" he demanded, his voice echoing in the empty space. Victoria followed closely, her flashy red dress contrasting with the seriousness of the environment. High heels hitting the floor like a drum, announcing an imminent execution. Her eyes scanned the place calculatingly, as if evaluating escape routes. Mr. Foster replied Stephen with studied calm. "Your mother is not here. I believe she went to the hospital as reported." "Do not lie to me," Frederick yelled. "She organized all this. Those documents at the restaurant were a sham." He shook the crumpled papers in his hand. "I want access to the offshore accounts now." Now I decided to enter the scene. I gently pushed the door and advanced into the light, my emerald green dress glowing under the spotlights strategically positioned. The impact of my presence was immediate. Frederick froze as if he had seen a ghost, and Victoria instinctively took a step back. "Were you looking for me, son?" I asked, my voice surprisingly firm. "Mom," he seemed genuinely confused for an instant before understanding began to form in his eyes. "What does this mean?" "The heart attack was as fake as your concern for me in recent months." I completed, advancing slowly toward him, "as fake as the loyalty you swore to this family." Final understanding took over his face. His eyes narrowed, abandoning any pretense of innocence you knew. "Yes, Frederick, I knew everything." I made a sweeping gesture with my hand. "The forgeries, the transfer attempts, the escape plans to Europe, the true identity of your accomplice." Hearing this, Victoria, or rather Valerie, was visibly alarmed. Her calculating gaze now frantically evaluated the environment, clearly planning an exit. "Do not bother, Miss Stone," said Danielle, emerging from the shadows and showing her badge. "The exits are blocked, and we have officers positioned at all strategic points." Stone. What is she talking about? Frederick turned to his lover, confusion stamped on his face. I saw the exact moment Victoria's mask fell completely. Her look toward Frederick went from accomplice to something cold and calculating. "That does not matter now," said Valerie dryly, taking a small electronic device from her purse. "What matters is, we need access to those accounts immediately. It will not work intervene." Stephen resuming his role as bank manager. "All accesses have been temporarily blocked due to suspicion of fraud. We have a strict protocol for these situations." Panic began to settle on her face. It was then that Danielle signaled and two officers emerged from their posts, approaching the couple slowly. Frederick Foster and Valerie Stone announced Danielle formally. "You are under arrest for attempted fraud, forgery of documents, and formation of a criminal gang for swindling." "This is ridiculous." "You say what?" Frederick protested, his face now red with fury. "It is a misunderstanding." "Mom, tell them I am your son." Those words, "I am your son," hit me like a dagger. Yes, he was my son. And that same baby I rocked in my arms, the boy I taught to walk, the young man I saw graduate with honors. How had we reached this point? I felt my resolve waver momentarily, a deep pain taking over me. It was in that instant that Lucy, who until then had remained in the shadows with Tommy, stepped forward. Her face showed a determination I had rarely seen in her. "Yes, you are her son," she said with a clear voice that reverberated through the hall. "And my husband Tommy's father. And yet you were willing to destroy all that." Frederick seemed finally to notice the presence of his wife and son. The color left his face when his eyes met Tommy's, who watched him with an expression of confusion and fear that tore my grandmother's heart. "Tommy." His voice was almost a whisper. I did not. But any explanation he tried to give was interrupted by Valerie, who suddenly pushed one of the officers and tried to run toward the exit. She was stopped quickly, screaming accusations against Frederick. It was his idea. He sought me out. He planned everything. I am just a financial consultant. He seduced me to participate in the scheme. The final betrayal. One con artist betraying the other. I saw my son's face deform with shock upon realizing that even the love he thought he found was nothing more than a sham, a manipulation to access our fortune. "That is not true," he protested desperately, now looking at me. "Mom, you cannot believe that she sought me out. She planned all this." I approached him slowly, feeling the weight of every step. When I was close enough to see the sweat now running down his forehead, I spoke low, just for him to hear. "The question, Frederick, is not who started what. The question is that you, my only son, were willing to betray me, abandon your wife and son, destroy the legacy built by your father with so much sacrifice." He lowered his eyes, unable to hold my gaze. For a brief moment, I glimpsed the boy he once was, vulnerable, regretful, after some childish mischief. "What is going to happen to me?" he finally asked, his voice reduced to a whisper. Before I could answer, Danielle intervened. "Mr. Foster, you and Miss Stone will be taken to the station to give a formal statement. The charges are serious and can result in prison time." Prison? The panic in his voice was palpable. "Mom, you would not allow that. You cannot let them take me to jail." I felt the weight of that decision on my shoulders. A part of me, the mother who had always protected him, wanted to intervene, use my influence to minimize the consequences. But another part, the woman who honored the principles and values George and I always defended, knew that some lessons need to be learned the hard way. "There are consequences for our choices," Frederick I finally replied. "I always taught you that." As the officers led them out, Valerie continued shouting accusations, trying to negotiate her freedom in exchange for information on other scams. Frederick, on the other hand, walked in absolute silence, his shoulders slumped in defeat. When the door closed behind them, I felt my legs give way. Nicholas quickly pulled up a chair for me to sit. Lucy approached, still holding Tommy, who was now crying silently. "Can I talk to him?" asked the boy between sobs, pointing to the door where his father had left. My heart broke. Not now, my angel. Daddy needs to resolve some things first. He did something very bad right. The insight of a child never ceases to surprise me. Yes, dear. He made serious mistakes. I extended my arms and he came to my lap, his little body still trembling with emotion. But that does not mean he does not love you. Good people sometimes make very bad decisions. Lucy sat next to me, face pale but composed. What will happen now, Mrs.?
Grace was the question floating in the air. What would come after this earthquake that had shaken the foundations of our family? I looked at Danielle talking quietly with the other officers at Stephen, starting to organize the scattered documents at Nicholas, waiting patiently for my next decision. Now, dear, we rebuild one step at a time. The following hours were a haze of bureaucratic procedures, formal statements, signatures on official documents. Danielle explained that Frederick and Valerie would be kept in custody at least during the initial investigation. The evidence was overwhelming: the recordings, forged documents, transfer attempts, incriminating emails. How long can he stay in prison? I asked. When we were finally alone, well past midnight, considering the charges and being a first-time offender, probably between 2 and 5 years, depending on how the prosecution handles the case. She hesitated before continuing.
In her case, the situation is more serious. There are records of previous crimes, although with other identities. We are talking about a significantly longer sentence. I nodded in understanding, feeling a deep tiredness settle in my bones. It had been an endless day, emotionally exhausting beyond what I imagined being able to endure. Nicholas approached with a cup of tea. You are extraordinarily strong today, Grace. I do not feel strong, Nicholas. I feel devastated. He nodded understandingly. It is natural. No matter how justified your actions were, we are talking about your son. I took a sip of the tea, letting the comforting warmth go down my throat. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? He reflected for a moment before answering. I think so. If you had covered up the crime, you would only be allowing him to sink further. Sometimes true love means allowing someone to face the consequences of their actions. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, we were finally released to return home. Lucy had taken Tommy earlier. The boy was exhausted and confused to stay at the station. Edward, always faithful, waited patiently to take us back to the mansion. During the ride, I watched the city lights passing by the car window. Some residences still lit even at that late hour, life following its normal course, while mine had been completely turned upside down. Upon arriving, I found Martha waiting anxiously at the door, despite the hour. Her wrinkled face showed genuine concern. Is everything okay, ma'am? I heard on the news. News I had not considered the case might have leaked to the press so quickly. Yes.
A reporter called an hour ago wanting to confirm Mr. Frederick's arrest. I said nothing, of course. I sighed deeply. Of course, there would be media repercussions. The Fosters were a traditional family with businesses in various sectors.
The arrest of the heir for attempting to defraud his own mother would be a full plate for the tabloids. Where are Lucy and Tommy? Mrs. Lucy is in the boys' room. He had trouble sleeping, so she stayed by his side. I thanked Martha and slowly climbed the stairs, each step seeming to weigh tons. I stopped at the door of Tommy's room, ajar enough so I could see Lucy sitting on the edge of the bed, gently stroking the hair of the child who was finally sleeping. She looked upon perceiving my presence and signaled for us to talk in the hallway. "How is he?" I asked in a low voice as soon as she closed the room door. Confused, scared, asked 1,000 questions about his father that I did not know how to answer. She sighed, running her hand through her messy hair. How to explain to a child that his own father was willing to abandon him? The pain in her voice was palpable, and my heart shrank for her, so young, still facing a storm she had not created. "We do not need to explain everything now," I replied gently. "Some truths can wait until he is more prepared to understand them." She nodded, eyes watery. "And Frederick, what will happen to him? Will he face the legal consequences of his acts?" "I cannot interfere in that, Lucy. It would be wrong, and in the end, it would not really help him." "I understand." She hesitated a moment. "Mrs. Grace, I do not know what I will do now. My whole life was structured around this marriage, this family." I took her hands between mine. "You and Tommy are not alone, dear. This is still your home for as long as you wish. And as for the future, well, the future always surprises us." We said goodbye with a long hug, and I went to my own room. Upon opening the door, I was greeted by the familiar gloom of the environment where I passed so many nights next to George, where we created plans and dreams, where we shared joys and sorrows. I changed the formal dress for a comfortable nightgown and sat in the armchair next to the window, the same one where I used to nurse baby Frederick Rock. His sleep tell him stories. The silence of the early morning was almost oppressive, allowing my thoughts to reverberate with painful clarity. I took the picture frame from the side table, an old photo of when Frederick was about 5 years old, sitting on George's lap, both smiling openly at the camera. Where did we go wrong? At what moment did that smiling boy transform into the man willing to betray his own family? Maybe there were no simple answers. Maybe life was too complex to be reduced to specific moments of right or wrong. I returned the photo to its place and looked at the stars through the window. The same stars I watched the night before, when I was still trying to decide the course to follow. What awaited me now, I would not take the planned trip, that was certain. I could not abandon Lucy and Tommy in this critical moment, and there were still legal aspects to resolve, family businesses to manage, the press to deal with. But beyond practical questions was the emotional journey that was just beginning. The grief for a relationship that had shattered the guilt that would inevitably assault me in moments of weakness. The uncertainty about how to rebuild from the rubble. I closed my eyes, allowing a single tear to roll down my cheek. It was not a tear only of sadness, but also of relief. The relief of someone who has finally confronted a painful truth. However devastating it was, we did the right thing, George. I murmured to the silence of the room, as if my husband could hear me from somewhere distant. It was not easy, but it was the right thing. The wall clock struck a 4:03 in the morning when I finally lay down. Sleep came surprisingly fast, the body demanding rest after the emotional exhaustion of the day. My last conscious thought was the image of Tommy sleeping innocently while the adult world around him crumbled and rebuilt. Tomorrow would be a new day, a day to start rebuilding, to protect what really mattered, to honor the values for which I lived all my life. A day to be strong not only for me but for Tommy and Lucy, the true innocent victims of this family tragedy. And as for Frederick, maybe time in prison would give him the opportunity for reflection he would never have found in Europe, spending stolen money next to a woman who never truly loved him. Maybe someday we could also rebuild that relationship, not in the same way, but something new forged in the flames of this painful experience. 6 months later, when the leaves began to fall in the gardens of the Foster mansion, I received news that would change the course of our family history again. I was reviewing some documents in the office that once belonged to George and that I had now transformed into my operations center to run the family businesses when Nicholas entered with an expression I could not decipher. Grace. I found something while organizing George's old files. He said, placing a yellowish folder on the desk that I had never seen. I think you should see it. What I discovered in those papers left me breathless. They were documents of regular transfers to an account in another state made by my late husband for over 20 years. Attached were photographs and letters revealing an unthinkable truth. George had kept a second family in secret with 3 children who now lived in precarious conditions after his death.
How? Why did I not know about this before? I murmured, my hands trembling, holding the evidence of a parallel life my husband had hidden so meticulously. George was extremely careful, explained Nicholas softly.
But the most surprising thing is this. He handed me a letter dated 2 years ago, addressed to Frederick. The letter revealed that my son had discovered the truth about this second family shortly after his father's death. George had entrusted Frederick with the existence of his half-siblings, asking him to watch over them if something happened to him. But instead of speaking to me openly, Frederick had tried to handle the situation on his own, discreetly channeling funds to them. When he met Valerie or Victoria and she discovered this secret, she saw an opportunity. She convinced him that the only way to do justice was to take full control of the family assets. What started as a clumsy attempt to help his half-siblings turned under Valerie's manipulative influence into a criminal plan to appropriate the entire fortune. This revelation hit me like a tsunami. Not only had I been betrayed by my son, but also by my husband for decades.
And yet Frederick, in his distorted way, had initially tried to keep a promise to his father before falling into the trap of greed and manipulation. The next day, I visited Frederick in prison. It was a tense encounter, but necessary. I showed him the documents confirming I knew the whole truth. "Why didn't you come to me directly?" I asked him, the pain evident in my voice. "Why did you choose the path of betrayal instead of the truth? I was afraid of destroying you," replied the broken voice. "Dad was your idol, the love of your life. Discovering he had deceived you for decades, I didn't want to be the one to shatter that image. And then, when I met Victoria, she made me see everything differently. She convinced me we deserved more, that those other children deserved their share. At first, I just wanted to help them, but everything got twisted. It did not justify his actions, but at least now I understood the origin of it all. The betrayal had deeper and more complex roots than I ever imagined. In the following months, I made a decision that surprised everyone, even myself. I contacted George's other family, invited them to the city, and met them in person. I saw in those 3 young people the same eyes of my husband, the same gestures I loved so much. Despite the pain, I recognized they were innocent victims in this story. I modified my will to include them, established a fund for their education, and offered them a place in the family businesses if they wished. Not out of obligation, but because I understood that George's mistakes should not condemn these people to a life of lack and resentment. Frederick from prison watched my actions with a mixture of astonishment and regret. "You have more strength and generosity than I will ever have," he wrote me in a letter. As for Tommy, my sweet grandson demonstrated a capacity for acceptance only children possess. When he met his uncles and cousins, whom he never knew he had, he welcomed them with curiosity and openness, oblivious to the complicated adult emotions surrounding that meeting. Today, 2 years after that whisper from Tommy that changed our lives, I look back and reflect on the extraordinary journey our family reconstruction has been. That Sunday morning, when my 7-year-old grandson entered my room to reveal his father's plans, I never imagined the emotional earthquake that was coming, nor the surprising revelations that would forever change our understanding of what it means to be family. Frederick's betrayal taught me that even those we love most can disappoint us deeply. Discovering that my only son, together with his lover, Valerie Stone, who called herself Victoria Sanders, planned to rob me while I was traveling to my lake house, was a devastating blow. The meticulous investigation I conducted with the help of Martha, my faithful housekeeper Nicholas, the family lawyer, Danielle, my detective friend, and Edward, my loyal driver, revealed an even more sinister plot than I could have imagined. The moment of confrontation at the Pacific National Bank will be etched in my memory forever. Seeing Frederick and Valerie being arrested, watching the mask of falsehood fall from both their faces, hearing my grandson's tears, asking if he could speak to his father, moments of pure pain that paradoxically were also the beginning of our healing. But the most extraordinary thing was discovering 6 months later the hidden truth behind the betrayal. My late husband George had kept a second family in secret for decades. Frederick had discovered this truth, and in a poorly executed attempt to help his half-siblings, fell under Valerie's manipulative influence, transforming an act of distorted family loyalty into a crime. This revelation taught me that betrayals are rarely simple, that behind the worst acts often hide complex stories of pain, divided loyalty, and missed opportunities for honesty. It also showed me my own strength, the ability to face painful truths and still choose a path of compassion and reconstruction. Today, our family is very different from what it was. Frederick serves his sentence on parole working at the Silver Hope Foundation, which I established to help elderly victims of family scams. Lucy has blossomed, resuming her career in psychology and coordinating support programs for families in crisis. Tommy, now 9, shows amazing resilience, maintaining a relationship with his father while developing bonds with his new uncles and cousins. And I, Grace Foster, at 69, run the family companies, preside over a foundation, and most surprisingly, have built a relationship with the children my husband had outside our marriage. It was not easy to open my heart to these people who represented the greatest betrayal of my married life. But in their faces, I saw not only George, but the opportunity to break a cycle of secrets and pain. The most valuable lesson I have learned is that family is not always defined by blood or legal documents, but by the decisions we make every day. Deciding to forgive does not mean forgetting or absolving responsibility. It means choosing not to allow resentment to consume the rest of your life. Deciding to rebuild does not mean restoring exactly what existed before, but creating something new and potentially stronger from the rubble. This story I have shared with you is not just about a grandmother who discovered a betrayal and set an ingenious trap. It is about how at any age we can find ourselves facing devastating truths that challenge everything we thought we knew about our lives, and still find the strength to move forward, to redefine what family forgiveness and justice mean. If you are watching this video, perhaps you are going through your own storm. Maybe you have been betrayed, or maybe you keep a secret you fear revealing. My experience has taught me that secrets have a huge cost, and that the truth, although painful, is the only path to authentic healing. I would love to know your story and your thoughts.
Have you ever faced a family betrayal? How did you handle it? Have you had to rebuild your life after an emotional earthquake? Which country are you watching us from? Please share it in the comments below this video. Your words could give comfort to someone who is going through a similar moment and feels completely alone.
If this story has moved you or made you reflect, I ask you to subscribe to the channel Elderly Stories. Every day we share real stories of people who, like me, have faced decisive moments in their lives and found ways to overcome them. Stories that can inspire you, accompany you, or simply remind you that you are not alone in your struggles. I would also greatly appreciate if you left your like on this video. This simple gesture helps us reach more people who might need to hear these experiences. And if you can share this video with someone you think could benefit from this story. Producing these videos daily implies many costs that are sometimes difficult to cover. If our channel has brought you value, I invite you to consider supporting us through the thanks button that appears below the video. It is a form of donation that allows us to continue creating quality content and keeping alive these stories that mean so much to our community. With your support, we can expand our reach, improve the quality of our productions, and even translate our stories into more languages to reach people in different parts of the world. Every contribution, however small, makes a huge difference for us. Remember to visit our other videos. We have stories about complicated family relationships, second chances, significant losses, and personal rediscovery at advanced ages. There's a whole world of shared experiences waiting for you on our channel. Thank you for joining me in this personal story. So intimate and painful. Sharing my experience has been part of my own healing process, and I hope with all my heart that it has resonated with you in some meaningful way. And remember, no matter your age, your economic situation, or your family history, there is always a way forward. There is always the possibility to rebuild, to find new meanings, to create beauty from pain. Life never ceases to surprise us, and our capacity to adapt and grow is perhaps the most precious gift we have. I wait for you in the comments and in the next video of Elderly Stories. Until then, I wish you strength in your own battles and serenity to face the truths of your life, however difficult they may be. I am Grace Foster, and this has been my story of betrayal, truth, and family reconstruction. A story that taught me that even at 67, life can surprise us, challenge us, and finally renew us in ways we could never have imagined.